I have to applaud the Yakuza team for branching out from their popular franchise to deliver an over-the-top, often hilarious sci-fi action game that, while definitely unique in its own right and is very fun to play, also suffers from being an occasionally janky imitation of its timely peers. Binary Domain follows Dan Marshall, a member of Rescue, as he and his team are sent into Japan to put a stop to the production of Holo Children, humans who have no clue what they truly are. However, on their mission, their trust is put to the test, and the clock begins to tick, all while a staunch Japanese detective is hot on our hero's tail. I really love the game's cast. Dan was a great lead, combining smug, cocky, and loyal together into a dorky hero. The rest of his team was a lovable ensemble of varied stereotypes who you get invested in, but sadly, a few members of the team lack major development, or just straight up vanished later on, not to mention the lackluster sidecast and underwhelming villains. Binary Domain's gameplay is a breezy, albeit standard third-person shooter, with fast-paced, arcadey cover shooting that constantly rewards you with credits for mowing down hordes of enemies. You shoot bad guys, get weapon and character upgrades, and rinse and repeat. There's only two major elements that just aren't amazing. First being the spongy boss battles that just weren't fun to fight and went on way too long. And second being the janky conversation system, which suffered unclear replies and confusing and sometimes annoying mechanics in terms of how the loyalty system and different endings worked. The game also tried to mix things up occasionally, sometimes successfully, like with the fast-paced and fun jet ski section and the mini-hub areas where you could talk to your team, or poorly with the annoying QuickTime events and the toxin chamber section. Graphically, the game is pretty darn good. It looks good for a PS3 game, isn't blurry or jagged, and while some of it does feel similar to any other game from the time, it honestly does have its own really unique feel and aesthetic. The characters were visually distinct and quite memorable looking. The evolving robots and bosses were cool, especially seeing them tear apart into plenty of scrap in the shootouts. And I really like the contrasting dystopia-utopia of a world on display. It also has that typical Yakuza team graphical charm you'd come to expect from any of their games. Performance-wise, the game runs alright. Not always perfectly, but outside of heavy gunfights where it can slow down a bit, it still performs decently enough on the PS3 to be enjoyable to play. Sadly, there were a few performance issues, like when it froze my console once then loading a previous save file, or when the controller just stopped working until I reconnected it. It's a really mixed bag when it comes to the sounds. Everything from the music to the effects to the voice acting ranged from competent, well performed and made, and memorable, to cheesy, stilted, occasionally forgettable, and just downright bad in other places. Thankfully, however, none of it ever brought the game down at least. And with all that said, Binary Domain has both the good and bad from games of the time it came out. It's a fun, over-the-top, often hilarious action romp with a likable, memorable cast, but it sadly still has issues with genre-standard gameplay, clunky innovation, and slightly similar visuals to what you would expect from a third-person shooter from the time. However, if you can get a copy, I really do highly recommend you give it a play, as even with its occasional flaws, it's still a fun experiment from a team well known for an entirely different style of game that holds up fairly darn well and is definitely worth a play. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I want to give a big thank you to the show's patrons, my friend Orion Knight for making the wonderful Art of Punish Neat you see now, and the thumbnail, as well as my friend Alex for touching up the thumbnail design, and Alexander for performing and doing up the show's intro song. My Patreon and their social media accounts will be in the description, and if you have any comments, questions, or recommendations, leave them down below as I read and reply to everything. This is Thierry Williamson signing off until the next video. See ya guys!